and welcome back to End Times Prophecy News Update. Just wanted to give a short update on Trump's having taken office. First, I would like to mention the 20% tax on items coming back into the United States for sale, the tariff, on items being made and brought into the United States from Mexico, which isn't exactly undoing NAFTA. NAFTA being that Hillary Clinton wrote and bragged of back in the early 1990s, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which allowed big businesses, corporations, to go to Mexico, get around wage laws, labor laws, Environmental Protection Agency rules and regulations, going to Mexico to exploit the Mexican workers, exploiting minorities, done by big business. The Democratic Party and the Clintons pandering to large corporations. So never let it be said that it's the Republicans acting racist, that doesn't care about the average worker or minorities, and that's really concerned with the EPA. Al Gore, who claimed to be so for making changes over climate change and global warming, had his hand in on NAFTA, knowing that those big businesses were going to Mexico and going to spill toxic waste and have no one to answer to, all while exploiting the Mexican workers who have no protection of wage laws and labor laws, getting around union high wages that the Democrats brought in. And meanwhile, who suffers? Everybody did, except for the large corporations. The Mexican workers, they certainly suffered. Many stories came back of corporations sewing blue jeans in third world countries, especially Mexico under NAFTA, where people leased out their future for up to 7 years of having to live in a work camp, weren't allowed to have children, make any kind of personal relationships, get married. They were signed on, leased out their life for 7 years in a work camp for slave wages. This was NAFTA, created by the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton. They were not on the side of the minorities. Ironically, Bill Clinton claimed that he was, quote, the first black American president. Oh, really? Then moving on to the Obama administration, who didn't do any better. Obama promised to repeal NAFTA. Yet when got into office, we saw a different side. Suddenly the Mexican worker wasn't that important. For those that are speaking out against Trump, I would say, you don't know your history, nor anything about our American economy, nor big business, or you would understand it was the Democratic Party pandering to them, and not the Republicans. And it certainly was not the Republican Party that was racist. I would call exploiting Mexican workers for slave wages the racist agenda of globalism that came from the Democratic Party. Hillary bragged of writing such legislation. Noting she'd been elected, it certainly wouldn't have been repealed. Now, bringing back the tariff under Trump hopefully will cause all those businesses that knife the American worker in the back, going to Mexico to make money, to be forced to drive back across that border and set business up here in the United States under our wage and labor laws, answering to the EPA. So Trump is on the right side of history. Looking at it from the taxes perspective, just the wage increase and the number of new employees that would be created, paying in taxes, would really help America get out of the slump, because right now, the boomers who retired a few years ago made up 50% of the working age population in the United States. In other words, 50% of the United States employees walked off the job, quit paying in taxes, and expect to start drawing huge sums in Social Security, of which they were promised. That's not there for them. 50% of the employees walking off the job, no longer paying in taxes, was the worst time to bring in national socialized medicine, and yet the Democrats saw fit to do so. Now, coupled with the fact that they don't want the United States public to hear, which is the baby boom generation of 2007, the largest generation in global history, that's bigger than the first baby boom generation, is nowhere near graduating high school, nor the age to get a job. And they've taken more out of the socialism than any group. And looking at Obamacare and the age discrimination therein, who benefits from this $17 trillion a year being sucked out of our tax dollars and borrowed from other countries? Over age 64 is lowest priority. That first boomer generation that paid taxes in their whole life is going to get no benefit from Obamacare because they are, quote, lowest priority. The over age 40 crowd, the Xers, who have also paid in taxes over the years, are low priority. And high priority status goes to those under age 20, who may never pay in taxes, born under socialism, and will stay supporting big government, propagandized by our school system. They will receive the benefits rather than those that paid the money in. Moving on, looking at Obamacare, the Democrats claimed during the Obama administration's campaign that national socialized medicine would be so much better than that on a state level. The Republicans supported continuing on with state socialized medicine. Now we hear that they're reopening the state socialized medicine due to Obamacare having failed in its first year. Yet we're still paying for Obamacare. Tennessee state socialized medicine, called TennCare, would now be brought back in under a new name, Insure Tennessee, yet keeping Obamacare as well. So the taxpayers have to pay for both, and we still go in debt to foreign countries trying to pay that off. We borrow money to make the minimum payment on that debt. Let that sink down into your ears. Borrowing money to make the minimum payment on a debt, meaning it's sitting there accruing interest. That 5 years ago on Obamacare that started out at $17 trillion would now accrue to $40 trillion. Constantly going up in debt. Even if we go in debt no further, it will still sit and accrue interest. Hopefully Trump will overturn the national socialized medicine nightmare. And remember, it's not free. It costs monthly to receive benefits from Obamacare. It certainly is not free. So really who's benefiting here has been the hospitals, the doctors. Because prior to that, the state socialized medicine was done on a sliding scale. And again, those on Obamacare that are over age 64 are lowest priority, bump to the back of the line. So when you need a CT scan or a biopsy, expect to wait on a waiting list, and maybe if they like your political and religious viewpoints, they'll make sure you get treatment. And if not, we know the outcome. They were called death panels for those with a terminal illness. Remembering that TennCare bankrupted because of the high HIV rates here in the state of Tennessee, some of the highest in the nation. And of course it was not due to ignorance. Our school system pandered to the gay agenda. They even handed out condoms with specific instructions on how to have gay and lesbian sex that was protected with the use of condoms. And instead of cutting down the HIV rates in 2006, that in Rutherford County, Tennessee, it comes up at the state capitol that 1 out of every 9 that gave blood come back HIV positive. 1 out of every 9. When 1 out of every 9 students has the flu, the school is shut down for an epidemic. So what about our healthcare system? That's what those death panels were written in for. So some of those leftists that really wanted to see socialized medicine, to you I would say, you're going to pay for something you will never get the benefit of, and few of your friends will ever see. And America will pay. Hopefully the jobs will come back to the United States, as Trump has brought the tariff back on those intending to sell their products in the United States that were made in Mexico. That would at least bring some jobs back here, more people paying in taxes. But that does not mean it will meet the outrageous minimum payment on the loan for Obamacare. As I said, we're borrowing the money to make the minimum payment and, quote, raising the debt ceiling to do so. Where we're at financially is a pivotal point. Some have said Rubicon, beyond the ability to turn back. So far in debt that America is going to collapse under the weight. And a generation brainwashed with socialism that never plans to get a job and work a 40-hour week. And to make it worse, pushing on them college education rather than good old-fashioned vocational schools that actually bring in an income. The Clintons stated, quote, we don't need those low-tech jobs. When they were pushing the North American Free Trade Agreement, all those low-tech jobs left the United States and went to Mexico, and so did the money with it. Yes, America needed those low-tech jobs. And any job that they can find. Service industry jobs were pushed by the Democratic Party. That's left America in arrears. I support Trump's decision on a 20% tax of bringing those items for sale back into the United States, forcing the United States businesses and corporations to come back here and answer to our wage laws, labor laws, our Environmental Protection Agency, and even some union wages. Though I support the right to work states such as Tennessee, because the federal government and state laws should never force someone to join a political organization such as a union. Especially noting most of them were ran by the mafia. And that's been well documented. Forcing people to join unions is ridiculous legislation that the Democrats themselves had passed. I think there's only 2 right-to-work states in the United States right now, and Tennessee is one of them. It should be your legal choice as an employee if you want to join the union or not. We have wage and labor laws laid out on a federal level. And we have civil rights protections, the 1964 Civil Rights Act protecting minorities and religious groups, gender, in the workplace. So there's no longer a need for labor unions, as it is in Mexico, where there are no set wage and labor laws. one could see the need. But that need in the United States has expired. Hopefully the jobs will come back to the United States, and at least we can make the minimum payment on the debt for Obamacare. But it does not mean that we should continue on in failed legislation paying for federal level socialized medicine, as well as now bringing back the state socialized medicine. All because the Democratic Party cannot admit they were wrong, and that the Republicans were right in saying socialized medicine works better on a small level because socialism works on a smaller level much better, such as a state level, state insurance, rather than on a national level. They didn't learn much from history. Nazi Germany went through the same thing that the United States is going through right now. It should have been a history lesson to say you cannot have big government over policing and paying out huge sums to spy on your neighbor. Nazis had a third of their population as government informants called the Stasi. Every home wiretap, just like the United States does now, where our federal offices are paying out $100 billion in each federal office. Let that sink down into your ears. $100 billion nearly to the NSA. Almost another $100 billion to the FBI. Another $100 billion to FEMA. Another $100 billion to the BATF. In needless surveillance, another $100 billion for Homeland Security. Huge, big over-policing and needless surveillance that costs the American public billions and billions of dollars that could have been reallocated to bail out Obamacare. So couple that with National Socialism. That was exactly what Adolf Hitler did that brought the demise of Nazi Germany. Vast over-policing, government informants, mass surveillance, added with what he called National Socialism and National Socialized Medicine. That was his party platform. Obama quoted him directly. And he also quoted Karl Marx, the same book that Adolf Hitler did, in, quote, Redistribution of the Wealth. Karl Marx's book, Das Kapital. Redistribution of the wealth. Big socialism that failed in Nazi Germany. And what did they do? They turned and blamed the minorities. Here in the United States, we have the same problem. Let's be on the right side of history, and instead of blaming the minorities, let's blame the Democrats and the socialism. And revamp. Bring back the small Jeffersonian republic that our founding fathers envisioned. Less government. Less over-policing. Less socialism. Actually, they didn't support any socialism. That was to be left up to the private sector. Religious groups. To help out their neighbor. Downsize government before it collapses. Big government costs big money. Just a thought. This has been another End Times Prophecy News Update. Carrie Geren Scoggins. All intellectual property belongs to Carrie Denise Geren Scoggins. Thank you.